2, 3. Just testing. 1, 2, 3. Making dog training lectures for you and me. Let me know when you hear and see me. I think we're good. We ready to go? Okay, awesome. All right, welcome everyone to today's stream. I'm just gonna make a little adjustments on my screen over here. Okay. Welcome everyone to the stream. Today's lesson is an introduction to avoidance conditioning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Kimberly. And I'm going to go over our objectives. And I have to admit, I'm a bit nervous about presenting this one, only because I find it so important. Some of these lectures that I find extremely important, I get nervous presenting them because I want to make sure I do a good job in presenting this information. So if you have any questions along the way, please write in the Pack Howl. It will help me out because this one's important to me. And it's a bit of a doozy. I don't know if it'll go that long, but I feel like there's a lot to say because it is essentially the end of the phase 2 lectures on the command structure. So bear with me over here, but I'm nervous but excited. All right. But these are our objectives. Number 1 is, what is avoidance conditioning? Number 2 is, why is it best to concentrate on it at this specific point in our checklist? Also, what mechanics are important to know? How do we use the full command structure for the first time? So exciting. What can we check? When can we check off the step? What is true obedience first responding to a cue? And what do some examples look like on finished dogs? And what does a training session look like? Plus more. I added a bunch of stuff to this. I was adding stuff to this lecture right up to the point where I hit the live button. Thanks. All right, I'll take a deep breath. There we go. I'll ask the nerdy questions if I have any. You always do, Art. All right. First, what is avoidance conditioning? So avoidance conditioning is a process that teaches the dog how to avoid punishment. And this goes hand in hand with escape conditioning. Remember, we did escape conditioning a couple lessons ago, right? Escape conditioning was also a process. Escape conditioning was the process of teaching the dog negative reinforcement, basically, and as a humane way as possible. So we can then use negative reinforcement in the training plan. But escape conditioning, right, it was not a synonym for negative reinforcement. Avoidance conditioning is the process where we are formally concentrating on positive punishment, which is adding an aversive. And it's meant we are teaching the dog, we are being a teacher to teach the dog how to avoid all punishment. That's why it's so great, right? It's the process of teaching a dog how not to be punished. So it's a very important step. And it's you want to make sure you have your foundation in place before you teach it. I want to start off right away with just some examples. Once we sort of visualize what that adds to the equation in dog training, it helps us visualize the process and why we're doing each step. So I'm going to put a few videos over here. The first video, I'm going to start off with the same clip I used from the previous lecture. So you can see with the wolf, with Elu the wolf. So you can see a concentration on a different part of the training in Elu, right? So with Elu, I'm just going to show the clip where we see the handler tell Elu to come, and Elu whips around from playing with the dog to avoid punishment, all right? It's for other reasons too, right? She's coming for praise and things like that, but we could not get this reaction from Elu in such a way unless we taught her avoidance conditioning. All right, so watch this clip first. Right, these should all start in the right spot.
Elu, come. Good girl.
All right, so see that where she just whips around. All right, Elu, come. She whips around and she starts coming. All right, so there are other reasons why she's coming, but one of the reasons that is in the equation is avoidance conditioning. We taught her avoidance conditioning. Elu knows, like she specifically understands how to avoid punishment. Therefore, it's very unlikely that she ever receives punishment in the training because we went through the formal process of teaching her it. But here you could see, you know, she came and she didn't do it perfect, and then we use a conditioned punisher at the end.
No. Good girl.
All right.
Good girl.
So even we use a conditioned punisher. I'm sorry, a conditioned punisher at the end over here, the word no, which the dog relates with an aversive. I wouldn't call what we see with Elu here completely where we would want to see her in the obedience, where she can avoid all punishment, including conditioned punishers, which are not even aversive. All right, so this shows, you know, it shows her avoiding, and then we use a conditioned punisher. All right, so we're not completely where we want over here. Now I'm going to show another one. This right here is a clip of. This was a dog that used to come to our group classes.
You're going to see it in the next couple seconds.
All right, this was a dog that used to come to our group classes, and the handler was Joe, and it was kind of fun. He allowed a producer that was shooting some stuff for me to come visit him at home. I wasn't even here. And without even Joe understanding the scientific terminology, he understood through group classes the concept of teaching his dog avoidance conditioning, meaning how to avoid all punishment to a point where it's usable. So this sort of gives an example of an end user, a client that has what I would call a finished dog, that the only thing you need to worry about with someone like this is making sure you stay on top of them so they know how to maintain the obedience. But in real life, I'll show you just basically what it looks like, right? When he gives the dog a command, the dog gets praised, it gets rewarded, it does all the other things we did before, but the dog knows how to avoid all punishment. So he gets to enjoy the dog. The dog rarely ever needs to get punished for anything. And he can bring the dog in more situations safely because he has reliability. Disclaimer, I never tell any of my clients to go take their dogs off leash around the road, right? But it just shows examples of how this is useful and adds reliability.
This is something Mike teaches a lot, like situational awareness. So I'll see the squirrel, so right away, before he has a chance to do something bad, it'll be like wolf and heel, and he'll be at my side. Wolfing, heel. You gotta be good, buddy. It's like around the house, I don't have.
So we got him telling his dog heel, and the dog knows. The dog reacts very quickly, understands the dog's going to get praise and things like that. But part of this equation is the dog knows he's also avoiding punishment by obeying in these situations, especially because if he's not obedient, it could cause him to get injured or Joe to get in trouble, as you can see right here. I guess while they were out filming, he's out on the road and a school bus goes by right here in the same clip, and watch what happens here.
He'll be outside, and across the street from me, there's no houses, it's just all land. So he'll see a squirrel, he'll take off. Wolfen, sit. Boy.
So here, what happened, as we see Joe, he was getting filmed and a school bus was coming behind him. So he didn't want to recall the dog because the bus is coming that direction. He chose to tell Wolfen to sit, which is just to stay put right where he is over there. And of course, you don't want this. Does add safety into the equation. As you can see here, he told the dog to sit. The dog just sits. And we have a school bus come by. So he used his judgment because I guess he didn't know. He didn't want the dog running towards the actual school bus. All right. And then, of course, a recall there.
Good boy, heel.
All right. So keep in mind that these are end users. So we're teaching the dog and the client obedience, which we're going to cover. Is obedience, if someone pays you as a professional trainer to teach their dog to obedient, we want to make sure that we stay true to that word, that we're not calling something else is obedience when the owner of the dog came to you because he wanted obedience, right? Now here goes another example, more technical, right? Again, this cannot be accomplished without understanding avoidance conditioning. So here what we have is we have a highly aroused German Shepherd that we're doing true protection training, meaning the dog is highly aroused in an aggressive state. And I would call this a complete dog, where the owner would come to our classes to maintain, just to stay sharp on his maintenance and give himself a chance to practice and in difficult situations. Ideally, more when you set up classes like this, you want to set up almost ridiculous scenarios that will be crazier than they would even deal with in real life, so that real life becomes easy, right? Becomes easy for the person. So here we're going to see is this is a dog, Piper. I think I used this clip, I'm sure, in other videos because she has very genetically strong barrier frustration and gets highly aroused. And he's doing a drill over here where this dog knows. This dog comes every week and loves to do bite work, right? She was selectively bred by someone who does sport training. That's where he got her from. And in this case, she's doing what we call real personal protection training. And she knows the deal. And there's 3 trainers, helpers, that are surrounding her handler, Brett, over here. And what he has to do is he just has to control her until, in this case, a dog does exactly what we teach him. Piper is allowed to act aggressively if someone aggressively makes a lunge for her owner, right? For her owner. But here, if you listen to the barking, you will hear, even when she's in this highly aroused state where he is not going to be able to rely on giving treats and things like that, is she's expecting that things are going to go down in this situation, that he has to rely just on a simple command, being calm, and the dog just respond, right? So we're going to see, it's going to be hard to hear with the barking, but when she's highly aroused with these 3 guys surrounding him, you're going to hear him just tell the dog to go down. All right. I don't know if you heard that, but he tells the dog down. Now over here, what happens, she has to maintain in the down. Avoidance conditioning also involves the dog avoiding punishment, not only into the entrance into the command, which we talked about last lecture with the condition punishers, but it also involves avoiding punishment by the dog prematurely exiting the command, exiting the duration. So same thing here. This is more like what a completed dog would look like with chaos going on. She's going to maintain the command until the situation happens where she was taught, where she was allowed, where he gets attacked.
I got this all on video. All of this is on video.
All right, so he gets attacked, and Piper goes all like gangbusters on everyone. So she's keeping, at that point, her job is just to keep everyone away from the owner. So whoever's closest and potentially the biggest threat to the owner, she's going to be aggressive, right? So if you go here, you can see, if you watch, it's the moment someone makes the move towards her dad here. All right, but then what happens next is really important. So it makes the move, those gangbusters. Now what you're going to see is, in these crazy situations, all right, ideally, Brett is never going to be in a situation like this with his dog. but it sure is going to make things much easier on him that he trained the dog in avoidance conditioning, that when he does give one command calmly, she, in one word, predictably obeys. All right. So I believe he just tells her to come or to heel, and you will see she'll confidently stop the behavior of protecting and then go back to a behavior of obedience, and avoids. Again, the purpose here is to avoid all punishment. Is to avoid all punishment. So watch what happens. You have to kind of listen carefully through the chaos to hear Brett give the command.
That was exactly my point, sir.
All right. So he gives a Piper come, and then she comes, and he heels away happily with her. All right. She's wagging her tail. End of session. All right. So this is what we are moving towards. Is avoidance conditioning is setting us up in the end product. We want to know where we're going so that dogs know how to avoid punishment, all right? Know how to avoid punishment. If you notice in the videos, the handlers have the ability to punish if they wanted to, but they're not punishing. They're not punishment. So as a professional dog trainer, you remember, people pay you money for obedience in a dog, And if we're not training a dog to be obedient, we want to at least be ethical in exactly what we are doing. That's why this particular lesson, if you're new to this lecture, it is very important to look at the foundation, which is why this is, of course, called foundation style dog training. And we want to get a recap even before we move on to understand what it is exactly that we're teaching the dog here and what are the prerequisites. And we always go over here, right? Training is all the way up here. So there's a lot of things that you really ideally want to have a good handle on before you do this, right? And of course is ethics, right? If we're ethical, so many, you're going to see, we're constantly going back to ethics because we're talking about professional dog trainers here, where someone is paying you and they're trusting you to train the dog safely, to be accurate, to be accountable, all these sort of things, all right? And we want to really, we're working on true obedience, all right? So I'm just going to make this part bigger over here. You know, what is true obedience versus a cue, right? So I like to try to stay away from like gimmicky words as much as possible, to be to remain as professional as possible and to be accountable. For example, if I'm saying a cue, I mean a cue. A cue can also be used interchangeably with one way with obedience. If you're doing obedience, you can say, you give a command, you could call it a cue, but not all cues are obedience commands, all right? A cue is simply a prompt for a behavior. What happens after does not fall within the definition. That's all it is. So when you're a professional trainer and you say you're giving the dog a cue, all right, give your dog a cue, give the dog a cue to sit, give the dog the cue to down. All it means is you're communicating to the dog a signal that you want them to do something. Whether or not they do it or they have to do it, it's not part of the definition, all right? Now, so it's good to use the word cue when necessary. Obedience, you got to be careful, in my opinion, like as on a professional level, when you have things like contracts and stuff like this, is I search every definition of the word I can. And anytime you look up the word obedience, is you're going to get something similar to what I wrote here, all right? Obedience is behavior that's respectful and mindful of rules and laws, right? Everything you're going to look up is going to be along those lines. You know, that obedience is basically that the dog does because it basically has to. You know, there's some sense of responsibility. And if you label a dog obedient, the dog is acting obedient. The dog is demonstrating obedient behavior. So if you are working with a client and you're teaching obedience, you have to keep that in mind, all right? You have to keep that in mind. And this little fact is comes into play many times when we're talking about professional training and ethics and liability, things like that. So we are still at this point in the training, remember, we're still preparing for and teaching the dog how to be obedient at this point. This is where we are. This is where I'm teaching. We're teaching avoidance conditioning. But look, there's still more steps. There's still more steps to get to a point where we're teaching an owner to maintain their dog, But this is phase 2. We're teaching it for the first time. So if you're watching this lecture for the first time, please, there's so much going on before here. You don't want to, you're not going to get the most from the lecture. You are not, if there's anything that you see in the videos or demonstrations you see in here, you cannot get the same results. You cannot avoid the side effects that I say will not happen if you do not follow the steps. The best way to be good at phase 2 and using punishment is to first be an expert at using phase 1, which is all positive reinforcement and getting the understanding how to motivate the dog to do the behaviors just simply because they want to do the behaviors. So don't skip the steps. And you also cannot do this. You cannot do anything that I'm teaching or demonstrating if you do not understand escape conditioning and do escape conditioning lessons with the dog first before you do the avoidance conditioning, and the same also the condition punisher. All right, it doesn't mean that someone cannot do avoidance conditioning. It happens, but there is a high likelihood of side effects, of side effects where you can be very transparent and avoid all major side effects by doing things in the right order, right? Issues, when dog training gets ugly, it's because of skip steps, basically, all right? So what are mechanics that are going to be important to know here, right? This was covered. I'm just giving a reminder. If you don't know your leash ninja, right, you just can't learn theory. Practice handling that leash, right? Leashninja.com gives a good overview. I'm going to show a video of me working with Orfeo, and I'm mostly using just a series of sliding on the leash and finger locks, and I could do most of what you see in the video smoothly. Also, if you are training this, please understand the training tools, right? This video isn't about the training tools. I'm going to have to mention them to a degree, but you need to understand mechanically how the training tools work so you can choose the safest option for your particular situation with the dog, okay? Now, it's how do we guarantee, all right? How do we guarantee training? It's because this is geared towards professionals. Again, please use a checklist. Use a checklist system if you're taking money from a client, all right? In my case, if I was training the dog myself for a client, and I was guaranteeing it and I had a contract, I had those checklists filled out. I filled it out. If you do not, this is a repeat, all right? Refresh yourself on the ethics lessons. If you want to be accountable, you have to account for the training. It's the only way to do it, all right? And because there is a difference between a dog that responds just to cues, but not really obedient. There is obedience, and there's also what we call false disobedience, which you hear a lot, which is just a dog may be ignorant. You may get a lot of side effects because the dog doesn't really have a full education, where people think the dog is being disobedient, where it really just doesn't know all of the steps. Now, how can we check off this step before we go into more video over here, right? When a dog shows reasonable understanding of being able to avoid all punishment, especially in repeat situations, that's when you can go and check it off only for the command that you see the dog is avoiding all punishment. Reasonably shows that the dog knows how to avoid all punishment for that particular command in repeat situations. This is very important, right? Because it's when you know what you're doing, you'll be surprised how quickly you could train a dog when you know you can move to another step. So I'm going to show you a lesson with Orfeo that I'm doing with Orfeo. And I had fun working with them because I normally don't work with Orfeo. That's Judy's dog. So you'll see he's kind of like all worked up, and he thinks the camera that we're filming, it kind of looks like his Kong toy because it's all black, and he just wants to like run. He thinks we were going out to play Kong with him, and he's so distracted by this thing, and he wants to break, and he's breaking. So I get out his Kong toy, and you're gonna see is all I'm looking for is, all right, when he's all worked up, does he understand how to avoid all punishment in this situation where I am working with him with the Kong? So if I do a session, and the next time I do a session, does he know how to avoid all the punishment? And every time I do something, basically a situation twice, can he avoid the punishment? Don't mix it up with generalization, right? Generalization is what you get to towards the end. Generalization is where the dog behaves, is obedient, does what you taught the dog. I mean, generalization could be used on any phase of the training. It's just generalization is when you get similar behavior in different situations that are similar but not the same, right? It's not at that point, right? It's not at that point. You're not looking for perfect stuff here. We're teaching what avoidance conditioning is about over here. So, I'm getting so excited here. I'm scrolling all over my screen here. All right. Now, does the blueprint make sense for what you want to accomplish before you build it in real life? All right. You are a professional. If you build houses, you want to make sure that blueprint makes sense before you build the house, right? And then, of course, it may make sense on paper, but then there's something mechanically or practically that just didn't work once you started building it, and then you have to adjust. As a professional trainer, you always have to start off first does this make sense on paper, right? Does it defy science? Does it defy common sense? It has to make sense on paper. Then you build it in real life. And that's why we are building this. But this is exciting for me because this at phase 2 is the first time we truly get to use what I call a complete command structure. And I'm hoping if you watched all the videos, you can appreciate why you just don't use a command structure. You build a command structure. And the command structure is built so that the dog can always win. The dog can always win. We want to train the dog so that when you give a command, it is always going to do that command. It is always going to do the command. And therefore, because we're doing things like pre-max schedule and rewards, the dog is always going to get an agreeable experience from obedience. The reason why, if you notice now that we stopped erasing lines and things like that, it's a closed circuit. You cannot, once you enter an obedience, once you give a command to that dog, you have a plan where there's only one way to go, all right? And the dog ends up finishing it. This, when you think of it this way, it helps you rethink even operant conditioning, right? Most people learn operant conditioning. It's just 4 separate quadrants, and they sort of separate them. But if you rethink operant conditioning as a closed circuit as well, you're going to see, and we have a lecture on this, but you can see how it relates to this. When we're doing operant conditioning, it always goes in a certain direction for us. Just like with the dog, all right? When the dog is doing well, if it gets off, we're using positive reinforcement, and then the dog stops doing well, it always goes in a certain direction, which is going to be similar. Our command structure is going to work hand in hand and agrees with science. All right. It goes away. The rewards go away, negative punishment. We add something to discourage the dog. We take away that thing to encourage the dog. And then we go right back to reinforcing the good behavior. It's a closed circuit. You can, as long as you keep communicating to this dog, it goes. It's a circuit. It's a wheel. It just keeps rolling forward. If we have a plan and we didn't finish making a good command structure, we have an open circuit and we hit dead ends. You can only go, if you're only using positive reinforcement, you can only go as far as the dog working for the positive reinforcement, and then after you hit a dead end, you stop. The same way, right? The same way if we're doing negative punishment and negative reinforcement and positive punishment. All right. If we're doing this, only doing this, it's going to be rocky. It's going to be rocky if we're not encouraged. Like I say, it's a wheel. It's really a broken wheel. So we're looking at this closed circuit that we're doing with the dog. All right. And now, can a dog gain confidence through avoidance conditioning? Is a lot of people are surprised that when I was training dogs that had confidence issues, especially fearful issues towards people and towards their handler or handler aggression and things like that, is I found the best way to gain their confidence was through a full command structure. And one of the most important parts was the key was once the dog understood avoidance conditioning, because a lot of dogs that are fearful of handlers or have some kind of conflict with the handler, it's because they're unsure. They feel things are unpredictable with their handler and they don't know when they're going to get punished, if they can avoid getting punished and things like that. So through predictability, you would see dogs loosen up. They would loosen up towards the handler because it's predictable. I'm going to give you an analogy. I'm kind of proud of this one. I just thought of this yesterday. All right. Chutes and Ladders. I don't know if any of you have ever played Chutes and Ladders. It's the first board game I remember having as a kid. Right. So in Chutes and Ladders, what happens is it's a game and your goal is just simply to win. All right. To get to the end. And what happens is as you move along the steps, if you do a good behavior, it's hard to see over here, right? Like this girl's planting seeds or a little plant, you get rewarded with beautiful flowers, all right? And you move quicker towards your goals. So you go along this. But if you do a bad behavior, you go down a chute, right? And you go backwards and you get further away from your goal. But everyone, if you sort of spin the spinner enough times, eventually you win. You can get to the goal. Now what we're doing with the dog, all right, is look at this. Like this is Chutes and Ladders, all right? If the dog does the wrong behavior, it doesn't matter if it's over here during the duration. They hit the big chute and go all the way back over here, right? And they have to do good behavior to make their way back to get to the goal, all right? And there's different ways you can move around this thing, and just like it could take you a very long time to win at Chutes and Ladders, is a dog, if they're sort of confused and they don't really know all the rules, is it could take them a long time to get to their goal. However, what if this is what we're doing to the dog is we're changing the rules a bit. We let them be in control of the spinner. Imagine if you played Chutes and Ladders and you didn't have to randomly guess what you were supposed to be doing and not really know when you were going to do a good behavior or a bad behavior. If you had control of that spinner, you would be very, very confident that you're just going to win, that you know how to win. You don't have to worry about going down a chute and you say, these little things, kids like crying down here, right? that's basically what you're doing with the good command structure. Wherever I hid the command structure, I have another window with it open here. All right, is it shoots and ladders. We're teaching the dog you're in control, and we're going to give you a command, and you're going to make your way. You're just going to stay on the ladders over here. You can avoid the shoots. All right, you can avoid the shoots over here, and you could just win. That's what the avoidance conditioning is. And we still have these in case the dog makes an honest mistake, that they know how to find the ladders again. All right. And that's what it's about. That's why we do the escape conditioning and we do condition punisher. So we can be minimally aversive when we show them how to get back on track, because it's real life, right? Dogs aren't perfect, and we're not perfect. So let's go. Sorry, I'm all over the place over here. Okay. So the goal with our client is to achieve what we call the maintenance level over here. All right. So phase 3, and we want to be able to move into phase 3. Phase 3 is when we get the dog working off leash, and we are working around higher level distractions and potentially using punishers that are much more aversive, that the dog will seek to avoid in these higher level distractions. But if we go through our phase 2 and the dog understands, you are going to see, just like every video I'm going to show you, there's never anything that I can't be transparent about. There's nothing that you can do as a professional trainer, if you stick to your guns and you don't skip steps, that you cannot be transparent about and never have to be embarrassed about. The dog should always look like, even through phase 3, that they are enjoying those training sessions with you, right? So before, I'm going to go into my lesson with Orfeo over here. Let's watch one more before I work with Orfeo. I like to look at just real life professionals, right? I like showing videos of clients doing the work, because remember, you're a professional. When you're a professional, it is very important that it's not about you being the greatest trainer in the world, right? You cannot succeed by being the greatest trainer in the world as a professional dog trainer. You can only succeed by your clients being successful, all right? It doesn't matter. They don't pay you to see what you can do with your dog, right? They pay you to be successful with their own dogs. So here is, let's watch a clip over here. All right. I like to show a lot of protection training video, because it relates to, it shows dogs working, when they're very motivated, very worked up. And if you could control a dog doing protection training, you can definitely control a dog that is just in because the owner needs the aggression managed. You can see here, this is the dog that was in the previous clip with the 3 attackers, right? So you can see, that there's a drill going on here, right? This is a much simpler drill. And who is that? I guess that's me in there. And it's avoidance conditioning, right? So it's pretty, dog gets a bite. But next, I want you to notice a theme with every owner and every video, every trainer that we see, is we are on a base of being ethical, and within that base we teach cynopraxis, which is the training process should be a good experience, should improve the life of the dog and the owner together. So even I'm taking an average client with an average type of dog that we would get, right? You're going to get a lot of Malinois and German Shepherds when you're training dogs, because they're more intense. So even though I didn't advertise that I specialize in these, they make their way to you. So watch at this point doing command structure that we got thus far. with this dog. All right, so this dog's name was Mally, and
Yeah, afterwards you
we're
start
working
moving
on
afterwards.
avoidance conditioning. I'm being silly. It was a distraction.
Oh man, we could really test. I could go in there with Bubba too.
And the dog should break around here.
You named the ball?
Yeah.
All right. Now notice what we got here. This is command structure, all right? The owner was caught off guard. She told the dog no, all right? Told the dog no when the dog went to bite. And what that does
man,
is,
we could really test.
again,
I could
this
go in there with
makes,
Bubba too.
if you watch the dog's body language, when we hear no,
You named the ball?
all right, the dog makes a break. It stops. It makes a mistake. It comes back wagging its tail. All right. We don't see a dog that is totally in fear because it made an honest mistake. We don't see an owner who is totally like screaming at the dog or has to brutalize the dog. Right. And she regroups, and it's not perfect command structure, which is why we always work on maintenance. But she sets the dog back up from the beginning. And then the dog is able to succeed without ever really receiving
Bubba.
a primary
This is Bubba.
punishment, even at this level of training. All right. Now, if it wasn't for her foundation of doing phase 1 and understanding it, she wouldn't be praising this dog and loving up the dog and letting the dog know that it's doing a good job. This is also part of the pleasure that the clients get from training the dog, is being able to let their dog do something that the dog really wants to do that usually gets like, well, these German Shepherds, right, and Malinois, it's in their nature. They're going to be reactive. They're going to be aggressive sometimes. They generally just get like yelled at it for it if someone's not involved in letting the dog do it sometimes. And if you look at her here, she gets to really love up her dog.
I'm gonna try looking for some of these.
And because she has a good foundation,
Yeah, you walk into a room with.
because she has a good foundation, even something like having a dog released from a bite, which you will see, it could be a big issue. I have lectures on it with police and stuff like that. It's never really an issue when a foundation is in place. It's just another command like everything else. And here you'll see she tells her dog to sit to release from the bite after a lot of love.
Nellie, sit. Sit, good girl. Good.
Good.
Watch.
All right. And it's what you say, all right? So our command structure is it's an always win situation for the dog. All right, it's an always win situation for the dog, which I'm gonna have to go find I don't have it memorized where I have it on my thing over here. The dog always, every command we want the dog to do, they're always going to win at it. So this brings us to my training session over here with Orfeo. And I messed up. I know what the problem is. Somehow, when I was saving my notes, I am missing a bunch of my notes. Somehow I deleted a bunch of my notes or saved the wrong version. That's not good. All right. So I'm going to have to remember some of my stuff over here. All right. So going into my training session with Orfeo is things to keep in mind before I show this session with Orfeo. I'm going to refresh this actually. Maybe it's there if I refresh it. Just got to explain my confusion. Please let it be here. Oh. It's okay. So my notes are here now. All right. Orfeo. I'm going to tell you something about Orfeo and why I chose him for this training session besides Darcy, even though I barely handle Orfeo. I love dog training. All right. And when I got into dog training, especially and as I was learning, I relate it. My analogy is someone who's really into cars. Like I have some friends that are like mechanics or really into cars. So what do they end up getting a lot of times for their personal cars, right? A lot of times they get like muscle cars and things that can really do a lot and, you know, and perform highly. But I always use the Ferrari. I always use the Ferrari analogy with that. It's like if you own a Ferrari, you better know how to drive it, right? If you don't know how to drive it, you're gonna crash it. You're gonna get hurt, or you're gonna ruin the Ferrari. So when you're making your training plans, you're a professional trainer, you got to think people come to you because they have difficult dogs. And sometimes they buy Ferraris not knowing that you can wreck that thing if you don't know what to do it, if you don't know what to do with it, or you could ruin it if you don't know what you're doing it. Orfeo comes from a line of dogs when I was really into creating Ferraris, right? I was supplying dogs for police, personal protection dogs. He was purposely, selectively bred to have high levels of aggression and drive. He was not meant for the average pet person. And matter of fact, his own brothers, dogs that I've bred, half brothers and half sisters, have, as police dogs, broken people's bones in 3 places, have sent people to hospital multiple times, even has a sister, when she was in an aggressive state, drove her teeth through the bones of the owner while she was in an aggressive state and wasn't handled correctly. These are not low-level dogs, right? These are not low-level dogs. And there's not everything we do with the dog, if you want to train at a high level, it's meant to avoid side effects. It's meant to avoid injuring the dog in the process, injuring yourself in the process, injuring the client in the process. As a professional, there's a high level of responsibility, right? It's why you hire a professional plumber to work on the gas line, so you don't blow up the house, you know, destroy your house or kill yourself or kill your friend who's not really professional but claims that they know how to work on pipes. It's very, very important. So I want you to notice some things working with Orfeo, because I love this session. It's because there's a lot going on that you would never really know. If I did not do escape conditioning, Orfeo gets pretty aroused in this session. If he did not understand escape conditioning, you're going to notice when I do positive punishment, when I'm teaching the avoidance conditioning, when I do that condition punishment, when I do the actual positive primary punishment, he learned about it in escape conditioning. Because he's not scared of it, it does not put him into a fight or flight, which some dogs naturally, they're supposed to fight back almost as a reaction when they are feeling fearful or they are in pain, including Orfeo's genetics. That's why, as a police dog or a protection dog, when they're biting someone, if someone hits them, they bite harder. It's also why a lot of police dogs end up getting into fights with their own handlers. We have a whole lesson on it. It is why I showed you in the Bill Keeler book, where they do not show, there's not taught avoid escape conditioning or a condition punisher, that he claims quite proudly, as a matter of fact, that it's necessary, that he has hung hundreds of dogs during the training process, that he gets into these fights or he gets into these battles. You will see, if you do not skip steps, I've been doing it for a long time and coaching people for a long time. I have no scars on me. I do not have to fight with dogs. And I was exclusively working almost all with dogs with high levels of aggression. Rather, the person wanted to use that aggression for a working purpose, or they just simply needed to know how to manage it. This is also why these techniques, why I worked with that wolf. I worked with that wolf for free, specifically so I can just test. I knew the wolf hurt the owner when she was just doing incomplete training methods, all right, that did not really give the wolf an education. So I worked with that wolf for free so I can just record it and to test and tweak things. That's the only reason why I worked with Elu. Now we're gonna put this on. All right, other things I want you to take note. All right, before we watch this, and I know this lecture is going long, but there is never a command that I'm now going to tell Orfeo that he's not going to eventually complete. This happens now at this point. It started in the last section with the conditioned punisher. It continues here, except my goal is, of course, for him to avoid all punishment. I stay predictable. I am going to stick to that command structure and be predictable. If I make a mistake, I am not the best trainer in the world, all right? I am kind of goofy and uncoordinated, all right? It's on me. I don't compensate for it by giving the dog an unfair punishment or lose my temper. I just start over, all right? You just start over, all right? Check off your individual commands when the dog shows evidence that they understand how to avoid all punishment for that command, all right? Both primary and secondary, all right? Let me go. I got to do something. I want to find this so I could just want to do this and put it in a separate window so I could pull it up, all right? Let's get back to Orfeo video. All right, let's play it, Orfeo. Okay. Ready?
Yep.
Pay attention to exactly what I'm saying. And I'm going to go to the command structure to show how it works and what we're looking for. At this point, just to take note, Orfeo, he seemed at some point to think that the camera, which is a small black camera, looks like his Kong. So he's focusing on the camera. All right, so this lesson is kind of broken into two spots, and I'm going to show you how I adjusted to that. Orfeo, sit. Good boy. Orfeo, down. Good boy. All right, so let's go. Oh, I should make this a little easier. Sorry, guys. All right. So notice what we have here so far. Chutes and ladders. Orfeo, sit. He did it. Good. He obeyed. I'm praising him. Reward on whatever variable schedule that he's on. At this point, I'm working him on a very thin schedule. Some of the times you're going to see during the lesson, I'm going to go back and pet him. I'm going to give him love. I'm going to give him things that I think he's going to appreciate. And sometimes he's going to get a reward during these. But I stay in this cycle as long as he's doing well. I think towards the beginning of here, you're going to see that I'm going to tell him to come. For Orfeo's purposes, what Judy does with him, and for most pet dogs, this is what I have him do. Come, I just want the dog to come close enough in the front half of me where I could put my hands on the dog and put a leash or whatever. If I want the dog to do anything further, sit or down or heel, we do that. You're going to see he totally, he obeys it at first, but then he doesn't remain in the come. And we have to go back to, he's trying, so I use the word no, and then he messes up again, and he doesn't try, and I skipped the word no. But it's all in the command structure. So check this out. Because this is where we start skipping the word no now. Orfeo, sit. Good boy. Orfeo, come. Good boy. No, come. Come. Good. All right. So I don't know if you noticed that. That happened quickly. Told him come. I praised him. He just blew past me. I told him no. And then he blew past me again. And at that point, this is where the judgment call, where you see on the command structure, where it says, did the dog try? All right. And if I didn't believe at that point that the dog was trying, you just go right to the correction and you correct the dog. You show the dog what is right. All right. So that happens pretty quickly. All right.
Or
So watch it again.
Good boy. No. Come. Come. Good
All right.
boy.
Let's keep watching.
He thinks the camera is a ball. He thinks the camera is a ball. You can't play fetch with my camera. Orfeo, fine. No. Fine. Good boy. No. Fine. Fine. Fine.
All right. So here, notice I'm using a lot of no's. For the first, I feel is honest mistakes. But then in phase 2, when I get the impression that he's not really trying, or he's incapable of really trying because he is so, if you're using no after no after no, and they seem to be having more like an impulse control issue that's taken over, this is where you can, when we're doing avoidance conditioning, is we skip it, all right? We say the dog's name, say the command, say the command, did the dog obey? If the dog didn't obey, and we're entering a command for the first time, and we do not feel that they tried, no. All right, this line is new over here. I just repeat the command with the proper correction. Also from this direction, if you're in the duration, and did the dog stay? No. If you don't feel that the dog is really trying to stay at this point, you can skip the word no and go right to the command. The primary punisher is more motivational than the secondary punisher, which is the word no. The word no is going to be used at this point for communication where you feel the dog really knows it, doesn't have an issue, and is just making honest mistakes. So in this session, compared to last one, you're going to see this switch to where I'm going to be using less no's and focusing on the point, on the part where I think the dog is going to keep making the same mistake over and over again and does not really seem to be trying to maintain that command or even obey it at that point. All right, so watch. Skip back up a little. So here I notice, with the duration on here.
Good boy. Fine. Good boy.
So he's in a duration here, but he keeps breaking it. And then I go back and he's getting his reward. By moving quick, he's now less likely to break it.
Good boy. Orfeo, down. Good boy. Orfeo, sit. Good boy. That's not toy. Orfeo, come. Good boy. Good boy.
Now we're noticing right away through avoidance conditioning, I'm getting different behavior, more obedient behavior quicker, all right? We're moving quicker, and I don't have to use as much no's, all right? The dog is learning to avoid all punishment by thoughtfully using that command structure. Reminder, notice what I'm still doing, all right? I'm still using primary rewards, which is the affection. I know the treat, I think I dabble with some treats in this session, but I could see he wants the camera, right? He wants the camera.
You are such a good boy. Orfeo, sit. Good boy. Sit. Good boy.
Right. Notice the lack of no's here. All right, I'm using primaries.
You are a We'll definitely have to give him a call after this. No. That's good boy. No. Good boy. Orfeo, down. Good boy. Down. Down. Good boy.
Now, again, showing why it's important to have a foundation. Could you imagine if, you know how hard it would be to administer this positive punishment on a dog that did not have the escape conditioning, did not understand what I was doing? It'll help you make sense why so many trainers get attacked by dogs that are designed to show aggression when they're confused or they go into fight or flight. You should get the impression that Orfeo is not really scared of the training. That he's not scared of the training.
Orfeo, come. No. Good boy. Good boy. Orfeo, sit. Good boy. No. That's good boy. No. Good boy. No. Good boy. You're a good boy. No. Sit. Good boy. Good boy. Orfeo, climb. Climb. Good boy.
Okay. Here you notice I told him climb. I got no response, no attempt to try. So I quickly went to, on the command structure, just repeating the command. I did not use the word no at this point. When a dog is not even trying, you never want a dog to just not even try. We're teaching him that if he does not try, there will be a correction. There will be punishment. We'll see that again.
Good boy. Good boy. Orfeo, climb. Climb. Good boy. Need a toy center. You want to you could film one, just get a toy, do a pre-mac principle. Just even as Kong, put it on the floor for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Part 2 to this. Now, where's my charts? All right. So, when I started that training session, I thought primarily Orfeo was going to be happy, just getting food reward from me and love. But then I've noticed there was something he would rather be doing than the training session. In this case, it was he wanted the camera. The camera looked like Judy plays fetch with them in the yard. He was under, remember, he has some training and he thinks we always have his best interest in mind. So I'm doing a training session. I'm asking a lot from Orfeo. And Orfeo, I can tell, is thinking hey, when are you going to release me to let me go chase after that camera, basically, which I can't let him do. So this is where pre-mac principle comes into play. If we do not understand the concept of pre-mac principle, which we did in phase 1, I would be stuck down here. What you see in this training session is what I could maximize without doing pre-mac principle in a training session. It's variable. I have him on a variable reward, and he's on a continuous punishment schedule, meaning every time he disobeys, there's going to be punishment. It's either going to be a primary or a secondary, but there's always punishment. His variable reward schedule, I'm talking mostly about the primary over here, all right? And it's very thinned out, and it's not of much use to him. It's not very motivational to him when there's something he would rather be doing. So whenever possible, you implement pre-mac principle into the concept, and this helps keep the training session. Remember, your job when you're doing a training session is to always make it an enjoyable session for the dog while still accomplishing what you need to accomplish. As a trainer, when you have a complete dog, the owner is not barking 20 20 commands at a dog within 5 minutes. All right, the commands come in ones and twos throughout the whole day. So the training sessions are designed to teach the dog something. And mostly during the day, we know what the dog wants, and Premack principle is very easy. We're constantly managing our dog and doing things that they like. You know, they either want to come have interaction with us, they want to play, they want to eat, they want to go into the yard, they want to. It's very, very easy to just do this in real life. But this is how you make an adjustment during the training session to now incorporate. What did I do? Incorporate the training session into, oh, I know what I did. Sorry, guys. The Premack into the training session. Where are you, Orfeo? Oh, okay. We'll find the spot again. Right over around here. Okay. So now we got a Kong. And just to show you, oh, sorry guys, I'm 8 up.
Oh, you got that. Okay, that's okay. Orfeo, sit.
We threw a Kong into the picture,
That's okay.
and I'm making
That
handler
was
errors, and I'm not making a big deal out of it.
Sit. Good
All right.
boy.
But watch what happens here now.
Orfeo.
All right.
My mistake.
I'm making mistakes.
Orfeo,
I did not
sit.
want him to do that.
Good
Start
boy.
over.
Sit. Good boy. Sit. Good boy. Orfeo. Okay. Good boy. Good boy. What do you got? What do you got? Orfeo, climb. Good boy. What do you got? You got your toy. You got your toy. Yes, you do. Orfeo, come. Good boy. Orfeo, sit. Good boy. Orfeo, out. Sit. Good boy. Sit. Good boy. Sit. Sit.
Do you notice the command structure? Do you notice the change in Orfeo?
Good boy. Okay. Good boy.
By adding Premack principle. I know he would rather be playing, so I'm now doing spurts of obedience, and I'm still able to teach him avoidance conditioning
Good boy.
while adding in what he really wanted to do
Good boy.
on
Sit.
a variable reward schedule.
You're a good boy. Sit. Good boy.
So I'm now using what he wants to do in the training session.
Good boy. Good boy. Sit. Good boy. Good boy. Orfeo down. Good boy. Orfeo. Okay. Good boy. You're so smart. You're so smart. You're such a smart boy. Orfeo, come. Good boy. You're such a smart boy. Come. Good boy. You're such a smart boy.
All right. So even with the word come, a dog must remain in the word come until you say their name, right? And give them another command. If you notice here, again, I'm not using the word no. At this point, I'm avoiding use the word no if I feel that the dog is going to be wandering off often, is not really trying. So notice after the recall, I told the dog come. The moment the dog breaks,
Smart boy. Orfeo, come. Good boy.
watch right here.
You're such a smart
He takes a step away,
Come.
come.
Good boy. You're
All right, this is all within the command structure to keep the dog tight to you, even on a come, until you release him or give another command.
Orfeo, sit. Good boy. Good boy. Good boy. Orfeo, out. Out. Good boy.
I'm even doing command structure with the out because Orfeo knows it. All right. I give one out, Orfeo out. He does an out. There's a punishment for it. All right. It's just a second little pump. Like I say, you can add these techniques. This isn't, these aren't lessons, of course, how to teach every single command, just the concepts of how to add it to every single command. And of course, he gets a praise for it.
Good boy. Fail down. Good boy. Down. Good boy. Down. Down. Good boy. Fail. Sit. Good boy. Fail. No. Sit. Good boy. Or fail. Down. Good boy. Or fail. Sit. Good boy. Or fail. Okay. Good boy. You are the smartest boy. You are the smartest boy. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. You go boy. You go boy. You go boy. You go boy. That's good.
So I was going to end the session here. I felt he was getting a little burnt out. I did another little small spurt. Now this brings us is what are we trying to accomplish with the dog, right? I do a little more. Let's see what I get from the dog.
Are you ready? You want to do more? Orfeo, sit. Good boy. Orfeo, out. Out. Good boy. Sit. Good. Sit. Good boy. Orfeo, down. Down. Good boy. Good boy. Orfeo. Okay. Good boy. You smart. You smart. Orfeo, climb. Good boy. Do you love training? Do you love it? Orfeo, come. Good boy. You're a good boy. You're a good boy. Orfeo, down. Down. Good boy.
All right, so we end the session here with Orfeo. Calm him down. All right. So what are takeaways from the lesson? Is when doing avoidance conditioning, we're getting to the last level of phase 2 over here. All right, this is the end of phase 2. Wherever my chart is. All right, this is where I tend to stay. If I'm working with a client, once I get them to this point, this is where I am really looking at least this level to get kind of the impression you see with me and Orfeo at the end over there. The beginning of the session is sort of like what it's not supposed to look like. And then what you're looking for as a client is to see them work in a command structure and you tweak them. You're working on basically maintenance, even at phase 2, before you move forward with them. We're looking for, which Orfeo did not with me, at least in that situation, is we're looking for, I would repeat sessions like that. If I wanted Orfeo to respond really well around his Kong with me in the yard, with me throwing it around and him holding commands, at that level of like mild to moderate distraction, I'll call it a moderate distraction, I would like to see a consistency in him avoiding punishment while still maintaining all of this in phase 2. You set your limits to a point where if you're doing this and it does, and you know that you and your client are being technically correct, and you just cannot get the dog to avoid punishment, it probably means that the competing motivator is much too high or not something you can reasonably do at this stage, and you would have to work on it at phase 3. Like, for example, a dog that's very reactive, and lunging it at other dogs, right? This would something that would be addressed in phase 3. And you can't use Premack principle for that necessarily, right? Like, let the dog go after the aggressive, do the dog he's being aggressive at. So that kind of stuff waits to phase 3. But you incorporate phase 2 as much as possible. And Premack principle within phase 2 as much as possible at this stage, because the lessons the dog learns here transfers to phase 3 and makes things really, really easy at this point. All right. I'm going to show, I'm going to end this lecture with something towards the end. I want to save this over towards the end because it's not necessarily about avoidance conditioning, but it's obviously one of the motivators why I do these classes and why these videos in particular go public, because there is a big problem that does really threaten professionals, and of course threatens dogs and people because of misinformation. So what is your logical opinion about these videos, really, like as it pertains to using tools in avoidance conditioning? All right. As a pro, we need to rethink perception of training tools from a logical point of view. For example, we're talking about punishment, and a lot of trainers they claim to not even do punishment, or they won't do punishment. Do we choose the tools that we're using for their ability to create pain and fear? I cannot train or fail with pain or fear. The dogs in my career, I cannot say, oh, I'm going to get what I want using pain or fear. Pain or fear would cause bad side effects of probably maybe getting attacked by Orfeo if that's what I was doing. So your tools and the mechanics, if you notice the mechanics I'm doing there, it's smooth. If you notice me, I want to enjoy my session with Orfeo. When I didn't feel Orfeo was enjoying the session, I modified it. And towards the second half, we get the feeling that Orfeo would enjoy to do another training session with me, right? If I kept it at that. If you're training in pain and fear, it results in broken bones and bone damage to the handlers and stuff like that. Like, serious injury potentially with a dog at Orfeo. So that is a true thing. There are trainers that train with pain and fear, but it's not about the training tools that you're doing, right? It's about your knowledge, how tools are possibly used. We should always choose our tools because regardless of the theory of how it works on paper, based off of safety, all right? Safety first for the dog. And then 2, can it be effective to do what we need to do with using the least amount of force, physical force? That is it, all right? That is it. In that training session with Orfeo, the reason why I'm bringing this up, because these videos are public, right, is I'm using a prong collar style collar. I'm using the Star Mark, which is like a plastic prong collar. But these are banned in a lot of countries, prong style collars. And a lot of organizations will say you're basically going against your code of conduct. Their code of conduct if you're using them as a primary training collar to teach your dog. But again, this goes into learning to drive a Ferrari, all right? Because you got to know how to drive it, right? You got to know how to drive a Ferrari. With Orfeo, if I don't use a prong collar, style collar, all right? This is a Star Mark. It's designed to evenly distribute when he hits the ends of the leash, evenly around his neck. That's the way the mechanics work. Instead of all the force being in the front, where if he was on like a flat collar, if he was on a flat collar, all the force would go in the front of his neck and hurt his trachea. I've seen that. You would hear him gagging the way that he was excited hitting the end of the leash. You could damage the dog's trachea. I don't want to damage his trachea, all right? But at the same time, in his case, if I used something like a poor quality prong collar that was sharper or something on him, and I did choose something that was giving him more what I would call pain, I would cause him to go in the fight or flight during those lessons. And it would have been overkill for his temperament and would have caused him to get aggressive towards me. All right. So I choose the collars based off of my knowledge of Orfeo, which happened to be a certain type of prong collar style, style collar. Where Judy, when she handles him, she does use, so let me see, I got one over here. If you watch videos, she uses a metal style prong collar, in all the videos, and you'll see similar results with Orfeo. But the dog weighs the same as her, right? The dog weighs, about the same as Judy, basically. She would not mechanically be able to handle him and teach him the lessons without that. And she uses it the correct way, where she does not get she doesn't get the bad side effects. And of course, there's videos on it. So the reason why I'm showing you about this is you need to know the mechanics. You need to understand the training, because you're being trusted with something, with someone's dog, and to keep everything safe. Now, I know that I tell you it's to be the good bacteria, meaning the best way to get rid of unethical training is to demonstrate good training, ethical training, sound training. It's like the good bacteria in our stomach. Our stomach likes the good bacteria better. So it's very easy that once you have good bacteria in there, that'll overpopulate the bad bacteria. So there's generally not really a reason so much to bash, all right? I'm very much against it at this point. It doesn't really get you anywhere, especially people that are trying, all right? But there is a lot of my personal motivation is ethical reasons, all right? Is like there's a big issue in the whole industry, at least at this time that I'm recording this, right? In August of 2021, where a lot of misinformation puts hardships on professional trainers, actually locks them out of following the code of conduct of a lot of dog organizations because of tools that they use. And I'm showing you this because it's not to bash. I think things carefully is I'm not going to tell you my opinion, all right? I'm not even going to bash. I'm just going to ask you guys what you really think, all right? Is because both of, not even going to say their names, all right? Both the trainers that are in these videos, they run dog training schools. And they're both involved in either themselves or their students getting involved in causing standards and regulations and licensing in the industry. So it leads us to two questions. Is it unethical, what we say? And two, what are people going to do about it? All right. What is the solution? So I'm going to show you two videos. All right. And this is the very popular respected trainer. It has a lot of good information. I read some awesome books by this trainer. But tell us what we think, right? Tell me what you think right here. And you can put it in the comments, in the pack howl.
They're a dog.
Whoops.
There are a number of different options for stopping your dog from pulling on a leash. Let's get the bad ones over with first. This is a prong collar. If used as directed, the prongs will dig into your dog's neck whenever he tries to pull. It's very painful, and that's why it works. We don't like this.
Okay. And But we have a halty over here, and I'll show you. All right, same trainer using a halty. Whoops, uh-oh. I accidentally got the name.
I've got to
wrong.
hang on for
It doesn't
dear
matter.
life. And it's everything I can do to plant myself. And I'm fairly strong, and it's taking pretty much everything I've got to hold this dog.
So what we have over here is we have a dog that's pulling and reactive.
I'm using the pole now.
She's using a pole to keep the dog in place. So we're admitting, right, that there's dogs that are hard to even manage. And, you know, this person is a pretty big, looks healthy, in this video, and is having trouble holding the dog, all right? So in this video, the same trainer that is saying, and, and helps to spread, spread information that hurts professional trainers that are using different tools. And it goes ahead and, let's see, is using a halty, right?
She has worn a gentle leader before, but apparently when she sees the dog, she gets agitated. She'll paw at it. And I'm not sure how well she's been handled. She's so excellent!
All right.
Pressure, sit. Once she sits, pressure off.
And we can see in this video, the dog
The
basically
difference pressure on. Waiting
is
for
being
the
used,
SIT once it happens.
that it's being used for punishment, all right? And then we also have, I'm just going to show you again. This is another one, which we all heard about.
Most people who use these kind of things when training have no idea of the psychological negative impact it's having on their dog, because so many trainers use stuff like this and so many people validate their use. To me, though, and to thousands of trainers like me and the best scientists and behaviorists in the United States and around the world, these contraptions are plain abuse.
All right. And this is, of course, there's never any, let's go on to some of the just examples.
Accepts the consequence.
I've got
All right,
control
so
of his
again,
head. He can't pull me. I mean,
He just hates it. Look at him.
yeah, but you have to give a dog time to become accustomed to it.
it's basically just, we're going to see flailing and just speeding up. I don't want to spend a lot of time in watching these videos, but we get the idea, all right? Now I want to ask, is when we watch these videos, I was doing a training session with Orfeo, all right? Would training collar, if you were professional and you're training personal protection dogs, police dogs, training session like I am doing, is like, what collar would you choose? If you couldn't, would you choose to do it with a flat collar? Would you choose it to do with a gentle leader? It's safer on someone who is working with a highly motivated dog that's lunging and hitting the ends of the leash. Considering that some of the collars that are called more humane, that the mechanics technically use more physical force by twisting and stuff like that. All right. So I'm trying not to bash here. I'm asking people educated questions. All right. So that's just how I want to end that, because this information is obviously put out to help people to create even their own courses. So did we fill our objectives today? My long drawn out lecture. All right. What is avoidance conditioning? Recap. All right. Avoidance conditioning is the process of teaching the dog how to avoid all punishment in the training. It's a good thing. It's a good thing, and it does not have to be stressful. The end result is the dog does not get punished. That's why we're doing it. Why is it best to concentrate it at this point in our checklist? Is you want to wait before you work on avoidance conditioning, because if the dog, first you need the dog, if the dog doesn't understand you have their best interest in mind, which we did in phase 1, you're just not going to have as enjoyable training session. Number 1, you're not going to know the concepts. Your clients aren't going to know the concepts of how to use Premack principle and the reward schedules and everything good. You can also get much more serious side effects if the dog does not understand the escape conditioning. And so you don't want the dog to go into fight or flight once it reaches the punishment. If the dog, once the dog gets punished, the dog should know exactly what to do with it. So you should not get fight or flight. It should actually be very smooth, easy behavior from the dog. It should not look like something that you would be embarrassed to do in front of a client in a group class, live televised, or anything else. How do we use the full command structure for the first time? All right, it's right there. You just connect the dots. The big judgment call that you have to do at this point is right here, is did the dog try? Right? And that's where it's not all exact. You have to know, did that dog just sort of make like a little honest mistake, or is the dog really not trying, having kind of like an impulse control problem, and is just not capable of really trying? That's where you skip and you go to a primary, but it's phase 2. Do not, I don't think I stressed this enough, in phase 2 is you are not doing highly motivational aversives. When you're working on phase 2, you are still maximizing helping the dog. All right. Punishment is designed. The punishment is used for corrections, which nudge the dog back on track to winning. All right. It just gets the dog back to winning. The dog always gets to the end when you're using a correct command structure. All right. If you've done your homework up to this point, I don't have to talk about the whole, you know all the pieces over here. Next is, when can we check off this step? You could check off that step for a command when you are satisfied. You watch that session with Orfeo. If I keep doing sessions like that with him, and I could, when he's around the Kong and I put it on the floor and stuff like that, if I find that he's avoiding reasonably showing that he's avoiding punishment after a second session in the same situation, I could check it off. All right. I can check it off at that point that he understands it. That's what you're looking for. Next, what is true obedience in responding to as compared to responding to a cue? Make sure obedience is the dog basically doing it out of obligation. The dog understands that they need to do the obedience to hit the goal. All right. It's not just a cue. It's just not a signal to the dog. You are expecting, the goal is you are expecting the dog to willingly do the command in all situations, all reasonable situations, to the best of your ability. You're always, as a trainer, seeking to get the most obedient dog as possible for the client, because that is what they're paying for you, right? That is what they're paying for you. That's what they're paying for. But do not disregard your foundation. If it's not cynoproxic, if you're not enjoying it, the dog's not enjoying it, the client's not enjoying it, it's all going to fall apart. It's all going to fall apart. Showed you what examples look like, what the training session looks like. It looks like that's all I got for you guys today. All right. Thank you for staying put. For those of you who made it through the full rambling lesson, but the content is important, and the next step from there is talk about phase 3. So everyone enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will hang around a bit in the pack howl to answer questions.